and welcome to the Oregon Files podcast. We are amateur podcasters simply for entertainment. If we misquote or offend, it was not on purpose to do so. Also, we're recording from our house, dining room, living room, back porch, or whatever we have. So you might hear some kids, dogs, animals, who knows. Thank you for listening. And here is my co-host, Elliot Bowen.
Thanks, Mark. I'm excited for today. I think it's going to be a cool, fun topic. For the most part, we've been sticking to a lot of stories that have taken place in Oregon. So I think today's kind of cool that we're tying into somebody who is a historical character that probably people don't even know about, that started off in Oregon, but had a big impact in history and gold mining. But he was a silver miner. But I won't steal your thunder by giving away who we're talking about, because
I don't think anyone, half the people listening to this, will
no
know
idea.
Yeah, and then it's Edge. Is it Schieffelin? Is that how you pronounce his name?
I'm going to say it's Schieffelin.
Schieffelin?
I think the SCH goes as the chef.
Do you think he had the everyday he's Schieffelin? That would be his thing.
Or was he a good chef?
He was a good chef. This is
Okay.
we'll find
so
out.
He could have opened up a restaurant and be like, Ed Schieffelin the chef. Maybe he's the first 5-star chef.
There you go. In Douglas County, it's not much for his years. This is also exciting because we also have our first sponsor on this podcast. It's going to be Video Games Plus and Level Up Frozen Yogurt in Roseburg, Oregon. So we're going to do a little shout out to them. Just to let you know, they are open 7 days a week. They're off Stevens and Roseburg. Level Up Frozen Yogurt has new flavors every month. Some are even dairy free, and they have over 50 toppings, including fresh fruit. And you can come and explore their impressive new game section and expansive collection of DVDs and Blu-rays. All kinds of great gifts. It's one of those places you just can't leave empty-handed, and they have cool gift certificates as well.
I love Video Games Plus.
Go there too.
I was there
way too much.
twice yesterday. Not only have they been around forever, but the consistency on the customer service and the people that work there, they're just so fantastic, and they'll find you games too, even if they don't have it in stock. I love the waiting list. I love just calling and be like, hey, can you let me know when Ratchet and Clank comes out for whatever, the PS5, and
Oh yeah, great staff.
I love Video Games Plus, and the frozen yogurt is delicious too. So.
Exactly. Yeah, it's something for
I
everybody.
can go
there.
on and on.
We're also proud to announce we also have our now email address. If you need to reach us, if you have any questions, comments, feedback, want to be on the show, or even be a sponsor, please reach us at organfilespodcast@yahoo.com. Once again, it's organfilespodcast@yahoo.com. All right, that's all the little announcements I had.
That's the show.
Yeah, that's it for show. All right, thank you. Wrap it up. No. So today we're talking about Ed
Schieffelin.
Okay, so
Ed the Chef Schieffelin.
Ed the Chef Schieffelin. I like it. That's how I'm going to remember him now. So this is a very interesting character we're going to talk about. He was born in Pennsylvania, and he's got all kinds of crazy ties through the West Coast that we're going to go over here. I'm just going to jump right in. We're going to talk a little bit about why he was so much into gold and silver. And they say that it probably began when he was in his early childhood in his Tioga County, Pennsylvania. Tioga. Well, that's a way off. Okay. In Pennsylvania, he was 5 years old, and his father, Clinton Schieffelin, became intrigued with the tales of wealth to be found in the West.
I know I read that. What year was that again?
It doesn't say. So here's the thing is that he was 5 years old. What we know is that
It was like the 1800s.
Yeah. So basically the guy's dad, so Ed's dad, Clinton, moved with his brother-in-law, Joe Walker, and the two of them sailed for California early in 1852, and they moved in with a multitude mining along the Feather River, but the news of the extravagant discoveries at Jacksonville and Rogue River drew them on to Southern Oregon. In 1853, they bought a land claim along the Rogue and filed for a donation land claim near Jewett's Ferry on the river.
I'm offended.
The two men made a pretty good thing of mining and farming, and in 1857, Clinton's wife and children, 6 boys and 2 girls, crossed the plains and joined them in Oregon. The Schieffelins were an affectionate family who were deeply loyal to each other and had strong family ties. They became solid citizens of the valley and soon gained the respect and admiration of their neighbors.
Do you think that was everyone's dream in 1858 to strike it rich?
You had to have been. I mean, that's like being on a celebrity on TV back then, maybe, like,
right. Like,
yeah,
what is it equal to today?
it's fun.
Stock market?
It's gotta be the stock market. I don't know, winning the lottery, having
Winning the
healthcare,
lottery? Having healthcare.
having quality healthcare.
Yeah.
Oh,
right.
man, that's, Ed was not 10 years old when he arrived in the West, but he soon began paying for gold on his own. So he just would wander
He
off.
started panning for gold?
Yes. When he's 10 years old, he would just start paying by himself. He'd wander off to the river.
There's no Xbox?
You can't do that back today's world. His brothers shared his interest and joined him, although their fever was not as acute as that which had seized Ed. As a boy, he regularly took pick, shovel, and gold pan and wandered alone into the hills, following the ravines and gulches. He was always seeking color, and even when he was occupied with his farm chores, he would stop to break quartz into pieces and then examine those pieces for gold.
Ed was just born to do it.
It just gets going, and that's it. I mean, I understand. You get
You got the itch early.
You get the itch early. If you know what you're looking for and having a good time, I guess I can't judge.
Ed sounded bored.
Ed was bored.
He was bored. He just needed something. He probably just threw a rock down. He was like, shiny.
Here's a list of, here's all the places he tried looking for in the valley. It was Jackson Creek, Forest Creek, Grave Creek, which sounds great, Foots Creek, the Sterling Gulch, the Applegate River, Illinois Valley, and even Umpqua Country.
Thought you were going to keep going with all the creeks.
No, I know that's
You're on a run of creeks.
Here's the funny part was he, they say by the time he was 16, he had gone everywhere in Southern Oregon.
Really?
There wasn't a spot that he didn't know about or a valley he didn't know that he hadn't been through already.
And he wasn't looking for gold, right?
He was looking for anything.
Anything.
He was looking for anything that
value or sell or something.
Bingo. So that was it. That was the whole lore of it. Let's see here. I'm going to take off here. I want to read this one. So the funny part is I'm piecing this together from a bunch of different articles. And I wanted to shout out to the Douglas County Museum of Natural History, who allowed us to go in and gather some of this information. Definitely check that place out.
Yeah, if you're from this area or if you're going to be traveling in this area, I know museums are like, not as exciting as what you would imagine, but this place is so awesome, and they do a great job about keeping the like displays kind of like rotated so it doesn't get, there's always something new when I go in there. I think last time I went there was a display cage of like 8 rattlesnakes.
Yeah.
And I was not expecting that. And and they even have a Lincoln Logs downstairs that you can just play with. We were talking Lincoln Logs last time.
I love it.
There's even a computer you can play the Oregon Trail game on.
Yeah.
And then we found out there's a library down there that has a bunch of cool stuff. But Mark and I we're two cool guys. This is what we do in our spare time. We go to library museums and we chat up with librarians.
That's one of my kids don't think
we're
I'm
so
cool.
fun.
So one story has the boy Edward running off at age 12 to the even wilder country of the Salmon River in Idaho, and of his intercepted by a family friend who returned him home. At age 17, he did strike out on his own again as a prospector and miner, and in the following decade, followed every mining rush in the West. Ed was really a prospector, not a miner, as he liked to be called. He preferred to be considered a prospector.
Makes sense.
He worked in mines, though, at panning his streams only long enough to buy a supply of food to enable him to continue prospecting. He had a goal which he dedicated to himself. Somewhere a rich lode awaited him. He knew it and knew he would succeed.
He's born to do it. Born prospector.
Pictures of him in later life do not do justice to man who provided mountains and deserts searching every day. The person who gave the account said that Schieffelin, even among the rough-looking characters of frontier mining village, was the oddest-looking human article he'd ever met.
What?
He was gaunt, 6 feet 2 inches, with black hair that were hanging to his shoulders.
Oh my god!
Full beard, tangle of knots. On it was almost as long as his hair.
Okay, so he was a hippie.
Oh, he was a hippie.
He was a prospect.
That's what this is.
So he's the original hippie.
Now here's this
makes sense.
His clothing was amazing. His clothes, including his hat, had been so patched with pieces of rabbit skin that he more resembled a fur-bearing animal. Whether his appearance or not, Schieffelin had a keen intellect and eye as he tramped the West from camp to camp to observe and noted mentally the characteristics of promising mineral country. So this guy went around. I mean, he did. He went.
Interesting guy.
Super, super crazy stuff. So a lot of the information we're gathering is from clippings, really from the oldest one we have is from like 1904 all the way up to the 1948. There's going to be an article I'm going to read you on. what I'm reading now is from a different magazine from 1971. So we're trying to piece together his whole time frame.
Right.
And all these different people did all these different
accounts for it. And there's just people that he encountered in his life all have a different variation of who he was, where he went, even his death, which Mark will get to, is a little bit sort of a mystery because, as you'll hear, he was kind of the OG of he was like DB Cooper for prospect miners.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no, it's just nuts. He just and basically he just wandered around so much. He had amazing patience and endurance. And as it turned out, his discoveries were not accidental. His finds were a result of patient, systematic, and educated search. In January 1877, Schieffelin emerged from Southern California hills, re-outfitted in San Bernardino, and set out for the Grand Canyon country with his gear loaded on tool mules. He was now 29 with 12 years of experience and disappointments.
The same mule? Did he marry that mule?
Here's the thing. He sadly had a bad reputation. So he was so invested into the gold search. He would only take enough food to survive for as long as he could. Okay. And his mule and that kind of stuff. And he would just go wander off somewhere until he ran out of food. That was the only reason he would come back to a town is he ran out of food. Now, if he ran out of money, then he sold his mule, put his blankets on his shoulders and went back into the hills with food.
Man.
He just did this on a repeated basis.
And that's like gold, iron, silver fever right there, man. Just trying to strike it rich once and he'd be set for the rest of his hippie days.
Now, get this. One of the things that he would do is when he got down into Arizona territory, okay, he met up with the army. And he kind of made a deal with the army because they were real worried about the Apaches. That was the thing down there. And they were trying to push him into Mexico. And Ed was going to, go with them, but they're moving too slow for him. So he wanted to go at a faster pace. So even though he was with the army for a minute, he left them pretty quick. He would actually prefer to travel at night. And he did not set fires because he didn't want to attract the attention of animals or other people. So he was really kind of that, in a weird way, doing his own thing.
Right.
You
just travel at night. More dangerous back then.
That's right. Now, this is where it gets interesting. This is where he's going to start to get, where he gets rich. Okay.
This is where he gets rich.
So he's in Arizona at this point. He leaves the army. The army's laughing at him, by the way. Like, you're not going to find gold out here. You're going to get shot by an Indian. It was right outside a place called Globe, Arizona, that he put his pickaxe in the ground, and it was so soft with pure silver that his axe actually sunk into it.
Oh,
okay. He puts a pile of rocks on there, and the first thing he does, this is amazing. He goes all the way back to find he had a brother who was working in a mine in Arizona, and he was going to get his brother to go back there and help him. Like, hey, let's take a claim on this, right? So here's the best part: when he finds his brother, at last, his brother did not recognize him because he was so scruffy and scraggly and looked like a crazy person.
Ed, you let yourself go.
Oh, it's amazing. Yeah. So he's outside. He literally waits outside the mine because his brother's shift wasn't up. So he hasn't seen his brother in how many years, right? And so he just waits outside the mine. His brother walks out, says, "Hey man, how you doing? I struck pure silver, right?"
Who the hell are you?
The best part is when he found his brother at last, it took some talking to convince Al, his brother, that the tattered, bearded figure was indeed his brother Ed. Even in a raw mining town in the primitive West, Ed was an oddity. No amount of talking, however, could convince Al that Ed had struck it rich. Ed's samples were pronounced worthless. So they didn't believe him.
Really?
Well, when you bring in pure silver, it's like, there's no way that's pure silver, right?
How could that? Yeah, okay. Yeah, sorry, go on.
That's just it. So Al was a man of little imagination. He had a steady job.
Little imagination.
I love staying there.
Little Ed. Ed was the bright one.
Ed's the bright one.
Al's a little dim.
Yeah, Al's like, look, man, that's the worst thing you ever want published about yourself.
Right.
I would rather say, hey, Mark was a drunk than it would say Mark had little imagination.
Right. Boring and little imagination.
Yeah. So basically, the wages were pretty good, I guess, at this mine. He was determined he would not throw it away based on his brother's wild scheme. In desperation, Ed then began working for the mine. This is a signal mine, and each evening he would begin again at his strike. But Al, as well, must have been deaf because Ed had to have a partner now because of how big his find was getting.
Yeah.
So he took the samples that he had to a guy named Richard Gerd. He was the mining and mechanical engineer of the signal mine where he was now working with his brother. Gerd was an intelligent man. One of Ed's samples assessed at $2,000 to the ton. or richer than that had been taken from the mine they're currently working on. So Gerd had an excellent job, but would never get rich at it. So he proposed they furnish a team of mules and supplies. It's 3 days away, go work on the thing and come back and see what they can find. So Ed agrees, and he gets his brother to agree as well. Al, only with great reluctance, agreed to go, and only because Gerd won him over. So Al wasn't going to be involved in any of this, by the way. Okay?
Gerd had to talk him into it.
So here's how this is crazy. It takes off. So at the last minute, Al backs out.
Al's starting to piss me off a little bit.
Al's very
I'm starting to get a little irritated with Al.
Now, here's the funny part. It was in their benefit because the early one morning when Ed and Richard Gerd set out, later in the day, Al changes his mind and goes with them. Now, here's the deal. Now, here's where your first, was this on purpose or not? Because all of a sudden, if you see 3 people rushing out of town early in the morning, they know that they found something.
Oh, no.
So they think they either purposely or just out of sheer luck that Al waited to go later on horseback and not carry mining supplies. Mm-hmm. That was probably what stopped them from people following them. They
kill you and take your claim.
So they start going through. So on arrival of Ed's claim, it appeared at once that Al's fears were justified. The ore was rich, but the pocket was shallow. Al and Gerd were reluctant to remain. So every morning at dawn, Ed struck out. Systematically, he covered the surrounding country, returning each night with samples. Gerd spent the day assessing the samples in a portable furnace he'd bought, and then Al would spend the day cooking and hunting for the game. So they were on this little loot out there, right? 3 disappointing weeks followed, and it began to appear as though all 3 were to find their tombstones there. So just so you know, here's the foreshadowing this. That's why it's called Tombstone, Arizona.
Say that part again.
Yes. So here we go. 3 disappointing weeks followed, and it began to appear as though all 3 were to find their tombstones there in the middle of the desert. Like
they were projecting that's where they were going to be.
They were making jokes like, we're just might as well, we're not going to find silver out here, but we'll find our tombstones out here.
Crazy.
Okay. So as you know, this is what goes beyond, what this is alluding to. Also, now here's the crazy part. This is all timing. Geological signs were favorable for Gerd, who knew the science of them. So he became convinced that they should stay. Also in their favor was that the region was temporarily free of all Native Americans, including the Apaches, because the U.S. Army had chased them in Mexico. But just Schieffelin and Gerd were not aware of that.
Chased them is a light word. But
yeah, exactly, yeah. Get. Yeah. Oh, man. At last, Ed really struck it. One day, he put his pick, soft ore, back in the ground, and the silver, he could push a quarter into it and leave a perfect print of the coin.
Whoa.
That pure the silver.
I couldn't even fathom what the react. You've been working for so many weeks and months, and to actually strike it and find what you're looking for and not look like a crazy homeless hippie,
you'd lose it. I don't think my brain can handle
wouldn't even. Yeah, it would be. Yeah, it would be so freaking awesome.
When when they assessed the value of the strike, the ore assessed. Remember the first one he did was $2,000, and they went out $15,000 per ton. So it's almost 8 times more from the other strike that even let them out in the desert. They continued searching and found several other rich veins. By the time all were registered in Tucson, the rush was on. Gerd obtained financing and brought in equipment for the mines and also for an ore reducing mill. Many other strikes were made in the area, developed, but only one other was as rich as they called it the Lucky Cuss mine.
The Lucky Cuss, because they cussed when they found it.
Isn't that amazing?
They couldn't find the right swear word. Cuss.
The city went from tents to permanent buildings overnight, they said, as how big this was. This one became Tombstone, Arizona.
Crazy.
Ed had enough of this is now we go back to Ed had enough of poverty, but not of wandering. And he now set out to travel in style because he was a millionaire.
Yeah.
They sold it. So they found this and sold it.
For a lot. I think I read it was like $696 million in today's money.
Yeah.
In today's money is how much silver they found after the whole span of them mining.
Isn't it? Yes. Here's the best part. He didn't touch his hair and beard. Okay. But he patronized the best tailors and bought costly handmade knee-high boots.
Knee-high boots.
He was a colorful figure in expensive restaurants and hotels in Chicago and New York.
Yeah.
The rich prospector from out west.
And you couldn't even buy a car back then because, right? It was
even yet. We're still turning of the century here. So
what are you going to be spending your money on? Just boots and suits?
Here's the best part. So yeah, that's what he's doing. He's just going to fancy restaurants, that kind of stuff.
Just eating good steak every day.
But now that he's got the taste now, and now he's got his brother Al, who's now all on board. Okay, Al with the very last minute,
right,
gets on a horse and rides out to it with him.
Yeah, right? I better go see what they're doing.
So they bring in his third brother, F, which I kid you not, it's EFF is his name. So F, okay. So now they're going to follow Ed around and say, well, where do you want to go? And because I hear Alaska's the thing. So they go now. So they get rich and they sell it. So now it's like, we're going to go to Alaska. They bought a small steamboat, hired a crew and sent out to search the rivers for gold. They discovered several very promising places, but did not remain to develop them. Ed just wanted another. So here's the thing is Ed actually found a lot of places, a lot of mines and good properties, but unless it was like a sheer jackpot, he would just walk away from it. And that's the crazy, there's theories of how many places he may have found.
Did that.
Well,
he just really wanted to hit. He was like, I'm already rich enough. What do I need in these little?
Finding a little thing wasn't
not worth it to him.
That's just it, And so they even say that when they trace back some of his journal and stuff, he found spots in Nevada that became big, like Carson City, Nevada, and that kind of like big places in Nevada and California where they did find big deposits of gold, like 20 feet away. And he was right there the whole time.
He just wasn't in the right spot.
He wasn't in the right spot and just didn't, like, nah, I'm done looking here. He's rich, which brings him back to Oregon. Okay.
So he goes to Alaska. He finds
does okay. He breaks even in Alaska. Okay.
All right.
So by this time
he's already rich anyway.
He's already rich anyway. So it doesn't matter at this point. So now let's go to,
which is interesting because Alaska ties it back. So when you think about Tombstone, you think, Wyatt Earp, and all that. If I remember right, Wyatt Earp spent some time also in Alaska looking for gold.
That's true too. And so that's one of the things too. I keep trying to read to see if they knew each other,
paths or anything.
They say that they most likely had been in the same saloons in Tombstone at the same time. But there's nothing that indicates that back then this guy, because probably to Wyatt Earp, that guy looked like a crazy hermit, hippie guy.
Well, he had to have been like a popular figure, because back then, it was really word of mouth and like. Your name meant a lot, so, maybe when Wyatt Earp, came to Tombstone, maybe Ed Schieffelin was kind of like a folklore or like a legendary hero. So he must have heard about him.
He had. So that's the thing is when he dies and the mystery of his death and what was the last thing about his death, you're right. He was so high esteemed of a prospector.
Yeah.
That his death left a mystery, and we'll get to that here in a second. This is really crazy foreshadowing in his journal, which, by the way, his parents were really good and taught him how to read and write, so he was very articulate.
He was.
When he was 22, he wrote in his journal, "I'm getting restless here. This is in Rogue River, and want to go somewhere where the holds wealth for the digging of it. I can't say that I care to be rich. It's not that. If I had a fortune, I suppose I would not keep it long. I like the experiment of being right up against the earth trying to find her gold."
So he likes the process of finding it more than really keeping it and becoming wealthy from his findings. He's just like he said, he's more of a prospector than a miner, right? Because he really just loves the idea of finding something. And maybe that comes back to his childhood of just cracking open rocks or whatever and just trying to find something and move on.
So 1880, they sell the mine, and his brother Al, who fought him, he only lived 5 years as a millionaire. So,
sure, he lived well. And all the crap that you breathe into, and the equipment that they used. They didn't have a backhoe and a D10 dozer.
So true.
I mean, it was all hand mined. It was all hand chiseled. Everything was done by, I'm sure they had some sort of like engineering, to help them, the silver and stuff out of the mines. But I'm not going to be honest, the very thought of doing any of that, I'm ready to take a nap.
It's crazy. Yeah.
That is so much persistence to believe that I'm going to find this silver. I'm going to find this. That takes some serious.
Isn't that crazy? I know you have to have that drive.
Right?
Yeah, you have to want it. I get disgruntled, changing a sink out these days. It's like,
exactly.
And I have to watch a YouTube video. There was no YouTube videos back then on how to be a
Right. It's all just gut instinct, and like he just really knew what he wanted to do.
So his maps, when they find some of his prospecting maps and that kind of stuff, a lot of the stuff was in his head, but when he did have to make notes of stuff, he just used the alphabet, which really threw people off because it didn't really tell them anywhere where he was at. But his main thing was to look for color. So especially, they say he literally found the red path from Rogue River all the way down to that silver mine in Tombstone, Arizona. Like in his mind, he saw red. Isn't that crazy? Because there was a reporter in 1975 went up to the Days Creek area and found. She said she
Oregon.
did. She found the Red Top Mountain, the Red Top, hillsides, that kind of stuff. It's like, and she
Wow.
could see where he would think there's a path pointing somewhere.
So he kind of, in his mind, he was making a mental GPS of, where this might lead to.
It's crazy the fact. I mean, like all up and down the West Coast, Arizona, up to Alaska. It's just nuts of how much ground he covered, and that was all he did was cover ground. It's so wild,
Right, and it was wagon and walking.
Yes.
Yep.
And with donkeys, yes.
And donkeys.
And
And
when he could, yeah.
yeah, who cares what your hair looks like?
All right. So they get back from Alaska. This is where Mary Brown comes to play. She's a young lady from San Francisco, entered Ed's life. A little time on his hands gave him an opportunity at least a last for romance. In the fall of 1883, they were married, and the next year they settled in Alameda.
I bet
California.
that was a good wedding.
I bet it was beautiful. I mean,
Good for Ed.
Here's the best part is that Ed purchased a mansion. In addition, he bought a large home in Los Angeles and an orange orchard for his parents.
Really?
Ed was at the high spot of his life. He was a big man and he now weighed 200 pounds or more. A representative from the Bancroft Company in California who interviewed him about the beginning of Tombstone described him as large, bronzed, with keen blue eyes, a physically perfect man. I picture the Rainey guy from...
Okay, so Ed did a full 360 on his physique. So he went from grumpy prospector to eating well millionaire.
So, but here's where it gets so. Marriage did not lessen his chronic gold fever. From time to time, he made short trips in which he panned for gold, and he was continually planning for his next expedition into big pay dirt country. One night, when he was half asleep, he suddenly remembered a spot in Southern Oregon which he felt he had failed to properly probe sufficiently.
Man, when I'm half asleep, I'm worried about what I have to do at work the next day.
Can you imagine you close your eyes? I was like, oh, wait a minute. I think that was a gold mine.
Right.
So
Got my pickaxe here.
he
Mary, call the horses.
to this point, even though he found Tombstone, Arizona, the silver was a big deal. In his mind, he hadn't struck it rich yet with the gold.
He wanted the gold.
So in his mind, he still was a failure. Okay. So
Not to us, Ed. Not to us.
Yeah, I know. So in around 1890, he returned to the Rogue River Valley, which he would always regarded as his home.
In Oregon.
Yep. Having left the area 20 years before as a penniless miner with no apparent prospects, he returned in grand style, wearing an elegant Stetson, city duds, fancy stitched calfskin boots, which came up over his knees, and a $450 watch that chimed the hour and the quarter hour.
Wow.
Can you imagine this guy, a watch making
Now
that
he's
much
just-
noise?
Yeah, he's
Wow.
GQ'd out.
He rides in a deep blue thoroughbred coach with leather springs and yellow running gear, drawn by 4 perfectly matched horses.
Ed was living the life.
Here's the best part: the people of Rogue River never seen anything like this,
Who the hell is this guy?
but they recognized him as a longtime, and he gave him a warm welcome.
That is that's crazy. Just little Ed leaves home, returns a millionaire. That's the American dream right there.
So it was Woodville, just outside of Rogue River there. So basically he came back, he visits his friends, he fished in the river, he sits for his portrait at Peter Britt's studio in Jacksonville. So he paid to have, his picture done.
That's what you do back then.
That's what you do.
Gotta get your portrait done.
I'm going to do that one of these days, just for fun. At Woodville, he hired Charlie Warren, a young man of 18 with no permanent job, to be his teamster and camp maker. For $20 a month, Charlie would do the cooking, tend the horses, and outfit, and do the driving.
What do you think Charlie was doing before then?
It's amazing.
Sitting on a corner somewhere.
Just the luck of the draw.
Right.
Here you are sitting on the corner of, some weird backroads city. You're
Right.
just turned 18. I don't think he
Kicking
went to
some
high school.
rocks down the road.
He's like, hey, man, what am I going to do? And here comes this guy in
Right. Some blue suit.
the watch making noise every half
Right.
hour.
Dressed to the nines. And that would start getting annoying. If my watch started making noise every half an hour.
He'd also receive a cut of any gold Ed discovered.
Oh, now that's the kicker right
So
there.
here's the go. They set forth in seemingly aimless manner, prospecting here and there, all the way from Coquille down to California, over to Nevada, and back to Roseburg.
Wow.
Several times, Ed found strong indications of gold, but he passed them by. Once again, it's not the big one, so he doesn't want it. This is what's so maddening about this.
That's the Allen Ed.
Yeah. He doesn't even, he hears his brother. He's like,
Right.
nah, unless it's 20 feet deep, I don't want to hear
that
about
kind of
it.
pisses me off a little bit, Ed.
He was looking for another bonanza, even though the odds against 2 rich strikes in one lifetime were not in his favor. In September 1896, after dismissing Charlie Warren temporarily, so he lets his ward go, who's questioning him the whole time, he returns back to Alameda and made his last will and testament. He left half of his estate to his wife Mary and half to his other brother Jay, who.
Okay, so wait a minute. We got F and J.
Remember, he's got 4 brothers and 2 sisters. Okay.
So A and B.
Al's dead. Okay. Al died 5 years after. He lived great. Okay.
Yeah.
F, I think, stayed in Alaska or just kind of did his own thing. I think he finally settled in, in Washington.
So the sisters were B and C.
Yep. And Jay must have been the youngest or something. His brother Charles and his wife were named co-executors of his estate. And early in the spring of 1897, he headed back to Oregon, picking up Charles Warren. So he lets the kid go for a little bit, finds a backup as he comes through.
Hey, Charlie, what are you up to?
It's like, he's like 20 now.
All right.
Nothing, man.
Because
I made some money out those gold mines you don't want. So he decided to try his luck again in Douglas County one last time.
One last go at it.
Finding an unoccupied cabin in the hills, he moved in, having left his valuable horses and his wagon with a rancher who lived near the mouth of Days Creek.
Sketchy.
Here's the best part: is the guy's a millionaire, and he finds an abandoned cabin. It's like, nope, taking it.
Yep.
And he leaves the fancy stagecoach and the horses.
Yeah.
With this guy, like,
I'm sure Charlie was there as his muscle.
Oh yeah. Well, actually, he gave, it says right here, he gave Charlie some time off to return to Rogue River to visit his parents and settled into the cabin alone.
Charlie, take the weekend off.
Yeah.
Come back. I'll need you.
He's around. He's not that old at this time. After a couple of weeks, the rancher who was keeping his horses, became uneasy as Ed said he'd been down for supplies at a specified time, but he failed to appear. So this is where we start to get something's up. When the local sheriff, Alex Orm, rode by the house, the farmer expressed his concern to the sheriff. Having a strong sense of foreboding, the sheriff rode off to investigate. He found Ed Schieffelin dead, face down on the floor of the cabin. So this is where I get contradictory things. One say, all of them say he was face down, which is crazy. But one say he was just outside his cabin. Some say he was on the floor of his cabin. And some say he was actually just, there's kind of 3 different spots where they found his body. Okay?
All face down.
All face down, all holding some ore that he found that he was crushing up to see if it had gold in it. Okay? The hard part is if he's right next to it. Now, the sheriff's story is he finds Ed dead. He wraps him up in a blue blanket and buries him right there on the property. Then he starts to investigate what's going on in the house to see, if it was murder or if he died, how he died, right?
So he died and then they buried him
that's
within the hour?
Well, that's just it. He's just a shallow grave. So the sheriff ain't working overtime on this. But that bothers me. There's a lot of things there. So obviously he's got to know who this guy is. Okay. He's a rich guy, came to town.
They have to know.
Okay. So this sheriff's not. So buries the guy in a shallow grave. Okay. He wrapped him up in a blue blanket. He's very specific about that. And there's a reason why for this. So he buries him in a blue blanket. He goes back in the house. He sees where his journal was open. Ed's journal. I finally struck her rich. He doesn't say where. He doesn't say anything else. But they crush up the ore they found was at least, they said it was $2,000 in gold in what they'd found in this tobacco cans.
Conspiracy.
Okay. Wild, right? Now, what's wild, though, is they finally ruled that he died of a heart attack. Okay. Because they exhumed the body to do investigation.
Right.
Now, what was weird is there was a theory that he may have gotten drunk. He got so excited that he got drunk because his whiskey was a lot lower than what it normally would be for someone who lives in the cabin that long. So he wasn't a heavy drinker. So they think when he found it, he got excited, he got drunk because they also found burnt biscuits there was blackened biscuits on the oven.
Well, then that's a travesty.
See, so that's really sad that I'm more sad about the biscuit loss.
Right.
Now, this is how it goes. So then word gets out that he'd struck gold, something like that. All these prospectors come from all around to see where he was at and that kind of stuff. No one ever finds anything. 10 years after he dies, there's a big investigation open because everyone knew that Ed traveled with 2 blankets and there's a reason for it. Okay, so if you knew Ed, you knew that he had a blue blanket and a red blanket. He would leave the red blanket behind at a spot where he found gold or found something so he can go back to his house and cabin or anywhere he's at and get supplies and food and go back to his red blanket.
Smart.
So when they found him, there was no red blanket. Somewhere in Days Creek, there's a red blanket covering up gold.
That's probably a little crustified by now.
Oh, can you imagine? It's been there 100 years now.
Right.
So it's a crazy thing. So that's been one of the big things that is because the sheriff said he had no idea about the blanket thing. So when he said, no, there's only a blue blanket in the house.
Yeah.
It's like, no, because then this is the reason why the terrain is really rough in Days Creek.
Right.
He couldn't take a mule with him. So he could only go. They say that he was experienced.
It was like 9 miles away or something like that.
So, exactly.
Like 10 miles away from where this cabin was.
Yes. Yeah. There's all these different things. And so the journal, most likely went to his wife. So he dies is their goal. So his other brothers, his family, who are now his extended family, became very spiritualists, and they thought spirits were going to guide them to this gold mine. Okay, they come here.
They're them type of people.
Oh, they are. They sadly burned through all the money that they had from whatever it was in the family trust.
Man.
Find nothing. Okay, they go the whole 9 yards. They hire hundreds of people. They get all this other stuff. They're going crazy, and they find nothing. And they leave brokenhearted. And they were hoping the spirits would guide them. The spirits did not guide them, sadly.
So it's not that Ed found something and buried it. Ed found something and was going to go back.
Yes.
And prospect more and try to dig it up.
Yes. And he was not an unhealthy guy.
Right.
That's the other thing. So there's rumors, too, that he may have gotten some new stuff some new that was going to help him see if there was gold in the ore and that kind of stuff. And he may have inhaled it. And that's what killed him. It may have mixed with the whiskey. There's the official record is he died of a heart attack. Now, his body is another issue. Some say that he was buried. So the sheriff buried him. Okay. Then he's exhumed once. He's buried again in Days Creek. Okay. They went and put him in the official graveyard. Then there's rumors that his wife took him back to Oklahoma and buried him there. But his wishes, and there's another report saying that he was buried outside Tombstone.
Right, with his pick and all his prospector gear and stuff.
His canteen.
Right.
Yes. And that was where he wanted to be buried.
Right.
In what was called a prospector's
graveyard.
Yeah, graveyard where they put a bunch of rocks up. So to this day, there's all these things that he already passed on through his career of these could have been strikes. But no, so they say that the red blanket is going to be the herring out there. And it's a wool blanket.
And it was gold that he was looking for.
It was gold.
Not silver.
He struck rich. It wasn't the $2,000 that he estimated. When people found his body and went through his cabin and found the ore, they estimated. So no, this is $2,000 in gold that he found. And this is little container.
Well, if you listen to this and you're by Days Creek, Oregon, if you find something, we get credit.
That's right. We want in. We want our
cut. Can't say we didn't help. Exactly. You heard it first. So if you don't know where Days Creek, Oregon is, you're out of luck.
I'm going to go one day just to drive by. I'm not going to, but it's very interesting story. So anyways, Ed Schieffelin, very interesting.
Super interesting guy.
Super wild. So that's the Ed story. Thank you for listening on that part. El, what else did we want to cover today?
Well, I don't mean to end on a somber note.
Somber? Yeah.
Somber. But today is the 20th anniversary of 9/11, which is insane to think about that it's been 20 years already.
2 decades.
It is absolutely insane. And I know when tragedies happen, and big or small, I think the first question usually gets asked is, where were you when that happened?
Great question.
Do you remember where you were?
I know exactly where I was. I've been working for Fred Meyer for about 5 or 6 months, and I was getting ready for work. And I just got ready and I was about to leave. I was living with my grandma's at the house at the time. And I heard my grandma scream from the living room. And she said, that airplane just hit that building. And I came out there to watch it. You're in shock. You're just in complete shock. And, I watched it. I called work, said, hey, I'm probably gonna be an hour late. And they go, everyone's gonna be late today. So I went in. And on the craziest thing with me, though, I'll tell you, within about 3 or 4 hours of that going down, the amount of people that came into Fred Meyer in Roseburg, Oregon, wanted to buy American flags. They wanted to buy kits to send to people in New York. We started selling stuff. They were buying flashlights, that kind of stuff. But I just remember the run on American flags. Like we even had like the garden ones.
Patriotism went up.
The patriotism was amazing. Right. And then also, 20 years ago today, my son was born. So he's my stepson. I call him my son. He's mine. I paid for him.
I own him.
But my wife told the story when he was born in the hospital. It was about the time that the towers were getting attacked. And so she said it was the craziest thing. She's giving birth. And all these nurses are in the room. All of a sudden, they all disappear one by one. They come in and tap each other on their shoulders. She goes, here she is. He's only been born 8 minutes. She's holding him. No one's in the room. And she's like, what is going on? How about you?
Apocalypse.
How were you? Where were you?
Crazy. Okay, so I was a senior in high school. I was a senior, and I was late to school that day. And the attack already happened, and I didn't know it happened. And I remember, I believe I had a drama class, and I walked into the auditorium, and I just remember that everyone was either crying or on the verge of just in the state of just complete and utter shock and disbelievement, just of what just happened, just trying to comprehend and understand.
Oh yeah.
Even 20 years later, of just the complete panic and chaos and emotions and feelings. It was just unbelievable. But yeah, I came late to school, and a lot of friends that I went to school with, their parents were either supposed to be in the World Trade Center or in New York or some sort of connection to New York. But for some reason they called out that day, or they weren't, it was just by the grace of God, just the timing of them not being, in the area of impact. And, so it's still just amazing. And one thing that really sticks in my mind, one memory, was days later or a week later, we were in a mall and eating in this restaurant, and friends of ours. And I remember, the whole coverage of 9/11 went on for a long time. Mm-hmm. I mean, it still does, but this was still fresh. And I just remember this lady was sitting at this table with a baby in a car seat. And I just remember her asking the restaurant to please turn off the TV because my husband just died on that plane.
Oh my gosh.
And that's still today.
Gut punch.
Man. And that still just resonates, that memory in me today. But I don't know. I don't think anything like that anyone will ever get over. 20 years ago, it's not that long, so, but
it was huge.
And it changed this country, and the laws and everything like that. And then, and even people that were, resembled the attackers, they had to deal with a lot of like racism and stuff like that. And it changed a lot of, people's values and what they saw and afterwards and stuff. So
it's anyway, a whole different world. When that happened, a whole different world.
Figured we had to mention that, and not to end it on a somber note, but we hope whoever listens to this, we all appreciate all the listeners and enjoy doing this, and we hope to keep doing it. And next time we'll end on hot dogs and other happy notes.
Yes, we usually get hot dogs and Lincoln Logs somehow. But yeah, this is Mark Layton and
Eliav.
And once again, we're at the Organ Files podcast at yahoo.com. Thank you and have a great day.
Cheers.